Hi, good afternoon. This is Sheila Leary from the Madison Herb Society, and I want to welcome all of you this afternoon to the 38th Annual Madison Herb Fair and our first virtual fair. I'd like to very much thank our tech support person today, Vince from Empowered Streaming. He's been just a godsend in helping us run this fair today. And before we welcome our final speaker of the day, I'd like to point out features here on Crowdcast for any of you who are joining us for the first time this afternoon. You can put comments in the chat on the side, and a couple of us from the Herb Society will also be putting useful information there as it might arise. But if you want to ask questions of Michael, you can see at the bottom of the screen, there's Ask a Question. Put your questions there, and then when we come to the end of the talk and go into the Q&A, I'll come on and moderate and ask the questions of Michael. You can also vote for your favorite questions if you like. So now I'd like to introduce Michael McClennen. Michael works at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and is also one of the teachers at Wildwood Institute and Herbs in the Madison area. And he'll show us how to make his homemade fermented granola that incorporates herbs. Welcome, Michael.
Hello, everyone. Glad to be here. Glad to share this knowledge with all of you. Yeah, as Sheila said, I'm a sometimes lecturer at Wildwood Institute on evolutionary biology and human nutrition. And I've been a scientist all my life. And in general, I've been always interested in the interaction between human bodies and the natural world. So I've just picked up a lot of info about that. And I want to share some of that with you. So, as I was doing the research for this talk, one of the things I found out is that granola is actually a much more recent invention than I had thought. The term was coined in the late 19th century. So basically, granola, as we know it, was one of the original attempts at making what we now think of as breakfast cereal. So the basic idea behind granola and other similar kinds of things is to take the grains and nuts and seeds that make a big part of our diet and turn them into a food that can be grabbed on the go, can give you a reasonable amount of nutrition for a meal, and tastes better than porridge, right? For most of human history, if somebody wanted to eat grains for breakfast, they just throw them in some water, cook them, and eat them, right? That's porridge. Well, you call it oatmeal or grits or whatever, right? It's filling, it's nourishing, but it's very boring, right? So people in the late 19th century tried to figure out what else can we do to make a more interesting kind of food. So unfortunately, what people have often ended up coming up with when you think of granola, when you look at the kinds of granola recipes you find in books and on the internet, they often involve dry cooking the grains. You just take some grains, coat them in fat and sugar, and throw them in the oven and roast them with nuts and stuff. So that's all well and good. I mean, it makes an edible product, but it's got a basic problem. Grains aren't actually all that nourishing when you dry cook them like this. There's a reason that so many of the grain products we make are cooked with water. For example, oatmeal or bread dough, right? Or rice or any kind of grain product. The reason is that those grains, the little grain seeds that make up the grains, right, are actually little baby plants. And the plants obviously don't want their babies to be eaten by animals. So they've evolved to lock up the nutrition inside them in using biochemical structures that are difficult for animals to digest. So grains are full of a substance called phytic acid, which is a phosphorus storage compound. And that has the property of inhibiting nutrient absorption in the guts of animals. It binds up minerals in particular and keeps us from absorbing the minerals in the food. So if you eat grains that are not cooked properly, you're going to get a lot of phytic acid, and you're not going to get a lot of minerals either from the grains or anything else you're eating along with them. Similarly, grains are full of digestion inhibitors, digestive enzyme inhibitors in particular. And they're also full of substances called lectins that are carbohydrate binding proteins that are very difficult for our digestive systems to process. Traditionally, right, humans have been eating grains for at least 10,000 years now in a major way, and probably before a long time before that in terms of just random foraging. Traditionally, what humans learn to do is to soak the grains and let them ferment a little bit and then wet cook them. If you soak grains for several days in water and then throw away the water and rinse them, you can that itself breaks down the phytic acid and starts breaking down the lectins and the enzyme inhibitors. These are one way to refer to these is anti-nutrients, right? The grains have nutrients in them, but they also have anti-nutrients. And by soaking and fermenting, we can degrade the anti-nutrients much more than the nutrients are degraded. So we end up with an actually much more edible product, or much more nourishing product, right? So we soak the grains, and then and the other way to do this, if you don't have an opportunity to soak for several days, just putting them in water and boiling, right, or cooking them when they're soaked, when they're full of water, also does a good job at breaking down the anti-nutrients. So my granola recipe actually does both of these, and I can tell the difference directly. When I first started making this, the first time I made it, I didn't do any of these things. I used one of the standard granola recipes for just coating stuff in butter and sugar and putting it in the oven dry. And I got a product that was edible and reasonably tasty, but I got a lot of stomach gas when I tried to eat it, which I also get when I eat other kinds of granola, especially commercial granola. And as I experimented and learned how to do this, I've now got to a product that doesn't do that. I can eat it and it goes down and it does not cause me a single bit of digestive trouble. So I actually know from my personal experience that what I'm doing really works. So let's actually get going with the recipe. Yeah, and we'll get to the herbs as well. So yes, so the there's a link to the to a document with the recipe on it that has been posted on the chat. So if you want, you can download and follow along as I go. So I wanted to start by telling you a little bit about my motivations for doing this and the criteria by which I figured out what to do and how to do it. So my basic motivation is that commercial granola is not really a very tasty or nutritious product. The stuff you buy on the store shelves is basically always stale by the time you get it. And stale granola is just not going to give you a lot of nutrition. Unfortunately, so many products you buy on the store shelves are stale by the time you get it that many modern people have trained their taste buds to not object to stale food because that's mostly what they're eating. If you actually pay attention to what your mouth is telling you, your body does not want to eat stale food. You instinctively know that this is not going to be good for you. And unless you override that by force of habit, it's just not going to taste very good. If you, like me, have deliberately started not eating stale food anymore, you will eventually, fairly quickly, revert to the point where stale food just tastes so horrible you don't want it anymore. So at any rate, I like granola. I want non-stale granola, and that basically means I have to make it myself. Granola is a food that works best if you make it from fresh ingredients and eat it within a month or two of when you make it. It keeps very well for a month or two, right? It's great. You don't even need to refrigerate it. But that's about how long any reasonably packaged and made food can last before it goes stale and starts losing its nutritional value. So that's number one. I want to make it fresh. Number two is use good fat. Unfortunately, the vegetable oils that commercial food processors all use because they're cheap go rancid very quickly. In particular, soybean oil, which is by far the most widely used food oil, goes rancid pretty much as soon as it leaves the processing plant. So when you eat granola or a granola bar made with soybean oil, or any other product for that matter, you're eating degraded fat, which is not good for you. It's actually carcinogenic in large amounts, and it's certainly not very nutritious. And you can't avoid it because the oils probably was stale before it even got to the granola making factory, let alone who knows how long the granolas sat in a warehouse somewhere before it makes it to the store shelf so you can buy it. So my granola is made from good fat. I use butter. Butter is about the freshest fat you can get, right? Because you buy it, it's generally refrigerated from the moment it's made, and it stays that way until it gets to you, and it stays in your refrigerator, right, until you use it. So it doesn't have very much chance to go stale. If you are vegan or otherwise don't want to eat dairy products, you could use coconut oil or palm oil or olive oil, I guess, although that's kind of a strong flavor. But basically, you want to use something that's fresh and as saturated as possible. The saturated fat stays fresh much longer than unsaturated fat does. So that's number two. Number three, let's see, what did I get here? Oh, right. Number three is soak the grains and cook them wet to get rid of the anti-nutrients. Ferment them, let those yeasts, the natural yeast, start breaking down the anti-nutrients and also breaking down the nutritious part into forms that are easier for our gut to absorb. Let them do some of the work so that when you eat the granola, it's an easily accessible food that will give you energy and not require your stomach to do a lot of effort to get it. So that's number three. Number four is flavor. Commercial granolas, both loose granola and bars, are almost always made with very strong, unsubtle flavors. They almost all contain either vanilla or cinnamon, and both of those flavors dominate everything else. Whatever else they think whatever else is on the label that they're throwing in, you can often barely taste it. So it's kind of monotonous, right? I mean, if you look at all the different flavors, they all basically are variations on these few themes. So by making our own granola, we can use different kinds of herbs and flavorings that suit our taste much better, right? We don't have to go along with the dominant cultural value. Apparently, in the United States at least, as far as I can tell, everything has to have vanilla in it. Why? I don't know, but it's very rare to find any kind of baked good that doesn't have vanilla in it. It just seems like that's an assumption that everybody makes, that of course you have to have vanilla in it. So I personally don't like vanilla. So I actually have a bad reaction to it. So I avoid vanilla containing products all the time. And that pretty much, among other things, cuts out most commercial granolas for me anyway, even on top of the other things. So there we go. And then one more, last thing is commercial granola is generally oversweetened, often hideously oversweetened. I mean, they really put a lot of sugar in those things. And if you like lots of sugar, that's fine. But if, like me, you try to eat a diet that doesn't have a whole lot of extra sugar in it, that makes it, really unpleasant. So by making our own granola, we can put in the amount of sugar that's right for us. All right. So let's actually get going with the recipe. And again, you can download it and follow along if you want. So the start of the recipe, the basic part of it, of course, is nuts and seeds and grains. You can use whichever ones you like and work well for you. I tend to use oats just because they have a bland flavor that's a good base for other things. But, you could use other kinds of grains as well. I like almonds. If you prefer other kinds of nuts, pecans, hazelnuts, whatever you like. And then I like pumpkin seeds and flax seeds. But you can, again, experiment and put in whichever sorts of things excite you and whichever are easily available in your area. So the nice thing about granola is it's a very flexible recipe. So the first thing we need to do, so let's measure out our ingredients. So the base takes about a quart of grain. So here we go, 1 pint. Two pints. All right, so then we get the nuts and seeds. So here we get to another conundrum of industrial food production. Nuts and seeds also go rancid very quickly once they're broken. So let's look at this almond here, right? It's got this brown outer coating on it. I don't want my granola to have whole almonds in it. Some people may like that, but I like the nuts in smaller chunks so I can eat them better. And in addition, they ferment better if they're broken down into smaller pieces. So the one obvious question is, well, do you want to buy slivered almonds from the store and use those, right? The problem is if you buy processed cut up almonds, right, they remove the brown outer coating. This brown outer coating is considerably airtight, not perfectly, and it's packed with vitamin E. Vitamin E is made by plants specifically to keep their seeds from going bad, from getting oxidized. When you break that outer coating, they start oxidizing fairly quickly. Within a few days, the nutrients are going to start breaking down. So as a result, I always buy whole nuts and seeds, and I break them myself right before they go into the recipe. So I'm going to show you that. You can break them up any way you want. If you've got a food processor, sure, throw them in there and just chop them up. Personally, I'm a more tactile kind of guy. I don't like mechanical stuff as much. So what I've learned to do is use just a little beater stick. There we go. I got this lovely sauerkraut masher here. And so I'm going to grab a towel, put it on here, start pounding. There we go. Okay. Normally it takes quite a bit more pounding than this. I'm not going to pound it all out for you because we've got other stuff that needs to be done today. But basically the idea is to break it up into little pieces like that, throw it in the bowl, and then keep doing it until you've got as many nuts as you need. The same thing needs to be done with the pumpkin seeds or other similar seeds as well. In particular, what I discovered is these things, if you don't break them, they don't cook very well. You can, even if you throw them in the oven for like, an hour or two, they still end up tasting raw at the end if they're not broken. Apparently, I think the outer coating is so watertight that it keeps them from getting cooked. But if you put them on if you crack them or put them in a food processor and chop them up a bit, then they cook just fine. All you need is even one crack in the outer shell and it's fine. So we're going to mix these things up. And let's pretend that we're going to do this. And then we are going to throw all the ingredients together. And then we are going to put some water in it. So the idea there is we are going to let these nuts and seeds and grains soak and ferment for at least a day, anytime up to 3 days. What I found, after 3 days, it gets really kind of stinky. But one day is enough to get it done. And if you can't get to it that day, you can wait another day or two and it's still fine. So we got all these ingredients here. Just go to the sink. I usually run it full of warm water, not hot, but warm, and fill it up. There we go. And so we're going to fill it up. Also, if you can't get all the ingredients in right away, that's okay. If you can get some of them in and start them soaking, especially the oats, which just require pouring, you can go ahead and mix in the rest of them later. Basically, these oats are covered, even regular commercially processed oats are covered by raw yeast, wild yeast. Exactly the kinds of yeast that do a really good job at digesting oats, right? So all you have to do is put some water in them, and those yeast will start going to town. I've actually did this a couple days ago. So for the magic of cooking shows, here we go. So here is one that has had a chance to ferment. Yep, there we go. For about 2 days now. Obviously, you can't smell it, but it smells kind of yeasty, right? Very much like bread dough does when it's been rising, and for the same reason, right? So, and you can see it bubbling a little bit if you look at it, right? The yeast are actually making carbon dioxide and bubbling it up through the mixture. So again, same process that would happen in bread. So what we're going to do is we are going to drain and rinse it. So got a colander here. I'm going to pour this in. Rinse out the rest of the bowl here. Now, I'm going to turn the tap to cold. We want to rinse this with cold water, and we want to keep rinsing it until what comes out reasonably clear. It'll start coming out milky, and you just keep going, kind of shake it around a little bit. Now, you may think, well, aren't we rinsing out a lot of the nutrition? Well, yes, you're losing some that way, but you're also at the same time, because you fermented it and soaked it, you're actually losing a lot of the anti-nutrients too. So on balance, you end up with something that's actually better for you than if you hadn't done this. So I'm rinsing it, and eventually it's got to the point you can't really see it from there, but that's okay. Now the water's running mostly clear. It's never going to be completely clear, but it's mostly clear, and that's good enough. So here's what it looks like. Oops. There we go. So it should look like this.
Put it down so we can.
Yeah, there we go. All right. Yeah, there we go. All right. So we are going to leave this and get it ready to go. And by the way, when you, going back to the bowl we just prepared, when you get this set up and it's ready to ferment, I generally cover it with a towel just like this so that it doesn't stink up the kitchen. It'll ferment just fine covering with a towel, and it's much easier to deal with. So, and I usually use the same towel that I already had used to pound the nuts and seeds under. Makes it easy. So, all right. So let's get this out of here. So, yes. So now we've got the rinsed and soaked grains and seeds. Oh, right. Then there's one more thing. This recipe comes in basically two modes. You can either make loose granola out of it, or, as I fortuitously discovered, quite accidentally, you can actually make granola bars very easy. At some point, I decided to add flax seeds to the mixture and try and see what would happen. At first, I tried whole flax seeds, And then after a while, I noticed, to be blunt, that I wasn't digesting them. They were coming out of me at the other end intact, right? My stomach was just not capable of doing anything useful even after they were cooked. So I then tried to grind the flax seeds up in a little grinder and put them in that way. And when I did that, I discovered that the resulting mixture did not break up easily. Actually, after it was cooked, it was a fairly solid sheet. And so I thought, hey, I can chop this up and make granola bars. So I did, and it worked great. So if you want granola bars, like something you could just like wrap in a napkin or throw in a Ziploc bag and take with you, then the thing to do is add some ground up flax seeds. And if you want loose granola that you can just put into a bowl and add some cream and fruit or whatever you like, or yogurt, and eat for breakfast, then you leave the flax seeds out. So let's try that. Let's see where so if you're going to use the flax seeds, you're going to want about 3 tablespoons per batch. And here I have a little grinder here. So we've got 1, we've got 2, we've got 3. There we go. I'm going to grind them up. Doesn't take very long. Here we go. Oops, where is it? Yeah, there you go. You can see ground flax seeds. And so we are going to, there we go. We can go take the same bowl that we used, and we're going to put the soaked grains back in the bowl. All right. And then we can add the flax seeds. There we go. You can actually add them early too. If you know you're going to make granola bars, you can just throw them in while it's fermenting. I've tried it both ways, and it doesn't seem to make much difference either way. Okay. So we're going to mix this up here. So this batch will make some nice granola bars. All right. So at the next step then is to, if you want to put any extra things like dried fruit, for example, or coconut slices, or maybe bits of chocolate, this would be a good time to add them too. I don't usually do that, but some people like those sorts of things in granola, so this would be the time to do that. The next step after this is to coat the grains with fat and sugar. And so this has a dual purpose, right? This is not an optional part. Coating the nuts and seeds and grains with fat and sugar is the core idea of granola. So it does 2 things. One is it makes it tasty, right? Fat and sugar are things that we humans crave, and it gives us a food, it produces a food that we want to eat and that feels solid and makes us feel full and well fed. So that's a good thing. The other crucial thing it does is it preserves the granola, because fat and sugar both inhibit the growth of bacteria and mold. Bacteria and mold can only grow in moist environments. They need water in order to survive. And if you coat the grains and if you cook them coated in fat and sugar, the outer surface ends up being too dry for bacteria and mold to survive on it. So once you do that, you get a product that doesn't need refrigeration and can sit on your counter or your shelf for several months. I actually did an experiment where I made some granola bars and put a few on a plate and left them out for 8 weeks on my counter, just right out in the open air. And they were still perfectly edible after 8 weeks. So you don't need industrial processing. You don't need chemical preservatives. By just using these traditional cooking methods and using traditional fat and sugar as a preservative, you can make a product that'll last for 8 weeks on a shelf. Might not last for a year, right? You know, for that, you probably need industrial cooking and wrapping in airtight plastic and stuff like that, right? But you can make something that lasts for 8 weeks, which is great, you know? I think that's a good way to think about it. So, fat and sugar. So again, I use butter because it's the very freshest fat available to us easily and cheaply, and it's easy to use. So what I do is I melt the butter on the stove, which I've actually already done. So here we have 2 sticks of melted butter, right, for 1 batch. That is a lot of butter, and yes, you do need that much to keep the granola preserved, and yes, it will make it a very tasty and filling food. So 2 sticks of butter is about 1 cup. So I usually pour this through a little strainer. Butter is itself a mixture of fat and protein and water. When you melt it, especially if you let it bubble for a while, what that's actually doing is the water is boiling off and leaving the fat, and then it kind of curds up at the bottom, and that's the protein coming out of the butter. So you pour it through a strainer, and you get, if you really are careful about doing that, that's how you make ghee. But I don't take it that far. I just kind of strain it a little bit. So got about 1 cup of butter. And then we need some sweetener. I use maple syrup just because I like it. You can use other kinds of sweeteners too. You can experiment. You could use just regular sugar if you wanted. You could use, I don't know, corn syrup or whatever if you wanted. Maple syrup is a locally made product, and it's healthy, and I like it. So, but again, there's lots of options. So what I found for me, for my taste at least, about 3/4 of a cup of maple syrup. If you're using other sweeteners, it may vary. You'll have to experiment. But again, the sugar is not optional. It's actually needed as part of the preservative. So you do need some. As far as I can tell, you can't really make granola without sugar at all, or at least if you do, it will spoil much more quickly. But again, so you have to experiment. If you're not on a sugar-restricted diet, then this actually makes a very nice product. I like the taste with about this much sweetener in it. It doesn't taste really, really sweet like commercial products do. It tastes a little bit sweet, and that's fine. So we got the sugar and the sweetener and the fat, and we're going to mix them in, right? It doesn't really, you don't have to be complicated about it. You just pour it in and then start mixing. How much time do you have, by the way?
Let's see. Is it an hour?
Yeah.
It's 5 after 2.
Okay, so that is difference. Good. You're doing well. All right. There we go. So you want to mix it thoroughly, right? The idea is that you want every piece of grain and nut and seed to end up coated with fat and sugar. That's important. The whole process, right? So there we go. I'm gonna just okay. So now we get to the fun step. I haven't talked about herbs yet. So now is the time to add the flavoring. And again, you can add whatever kind of flavoring really works well for you. And again, you'll have to experiment to figure out for you what kind of herbs you like in your granola and how much to use, how spicy you want it, right? My favorites are nutmeg and ginger. So that's what I tend to use. No cinnamon, no vanilla, just nutmeg and ginger. And to me, that just is a lovely, spicy, tasty mixture. So what I found is it takes about 1/4 teaspoon of each for me for one batch, makes an adequately spicy. So here's the thing, you can use any herbs you like, right? You don't have to be constrained by cultural means and traditions, right? If you want to make something that has, I don't know, like sweet basil in it, right? Or pepper, or cardamom, or just about any herb that you enjoy. Lavender. I haven't got around to it yet, but I've always thought that it'd be nice to try some lavender in granola. So yeah, this is your chance to get away from monotony and experiment with some interesting flavors. Oh, right, yeah. Some more ideas. Anise seed or fennel seed, right? Those make fantastic granola. And of course, if you want, you can also add vanilla. You could add cocoa powder. You could even add some chocolate nibs if you want something that has a little more concentrated chocolatey flavor. And yeah, got those. And again, if you want, you could try savory herbs. I haven't done it, but it might be kind of nice to have some granola made with rosemary maybe, or marjoram, or who knows what, right? The point is you are in control of this, right? And you can do things that commercial manufacturers, even the artisanal ones, just don't do because they know that it's going to not do well for their market. So let's get some herbs and spices in here. All right. So we're going to get about a quarter teaspoon of ginger. A little more than that. So it's like a quarter teaspoon and a smidge, because I like it a little bit spicy. And then same of nutmeg. There we go. And then again, we're going to stir, get it all uniformly mixed.
I can smell it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I wish you all could smell it over the internet, but it's just so lovely and spicy. Okay, good. So we're just about ready to put it in the oven. So next thing we need is a cookie sheet. There we go. And now we come to another very important step, which is to grease the cookie sheet. Whenever I occasionally forget to do this, and then I always regret it later because it makes it so much more difficult to remove the stuff. So obviously the thing to grease the cookie sheet with is whatever fat you use to make the granola in the first place, right? So if you use coconut oil, just grease the cookie sheet with some of that. So I used butter, so I'm going to grease up our cookie sheet with butter. This is especially important for granola bars, which this batch is going to be, because it's a because I put flax seeds in it, right? So, but even for loose granola, yes, it helps to make it easy to remove it from the cookie sheet after it's been baking. All right, so now we put the granola in. All right. So then we get another important step, which is to make sure it's in a layer of uniform thickness. Here, I'm going to have to bring this back over here so you can see. Because we're wet cooking it, and we ultimately want the moisture to all evaporate away. So we want it to cook wet for a while, but we need to end up with a dry product, because that is what will keep and not mold or spoil, right? So we actually have to cook it in such a way that the water mostly goes away by the end. And so what I've discovered is if it's in a uniform layer, then it will all cook at roughly the same speed. If it's thicker in some places and thin in others, then you'll end up getting some of it burned and crisp, which you don't want, and others of it still too moist. So so that's what I do with this spoon here, is I kind of massage it a little bit and even it out. Another important thing, actually, you want the center to be a little thinner than the outside. So you want to push some of it to the outside, because the outside cooks faster, right? Because it's on the outside, it has more exposed to the heat. So the outside edges cook faster, so they need to be a little thicker, and you need the inside to be parts to be a little thinner. Not much, but just slightly helps. Again, the more you do this recipe, it gets really easy. Actually, I haven't said that before. This may seem very complicated to you. I'm sure it does. What I've discovered is once you do it a lot, once you get used to it, it just becomes routine. And what I do is I just set it up, because it goes in little chunks, right? You chop up, you pound up the ingredients and you put them in and set them to ferment. And then later on, you take them off and drain them and melt the butter. And then, later on, you put them in the oven, and then later on, you take them out. It's little chunks, right? So you can do that while you're doing other stuff in the kitchen. When it comes right down to it, each batch is not that much work. It's just broken up over several days. So once you get it as part of your kitchen routine, you can just make yourself a steady supply of granola by doing it every couple weeks, and it's just not a big deal. All right, so I've got this all set up, and we can go and get ready to put it in the oven. Now I've actually got some batches I pre-made, which are ready to come out of the first phase of cooking. It needs to be cooked in 2 phases just because it just doesn't cook right otherwise. The bottom part retains a lot of moisture. You got to flip them over. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So I'm going to take the pre-made batches out and put this one in. So the cook time, I put it as an hour. It may vary. Sometimes, depending on your oven and how much water this particular batch has absorbed. But here, I'll put this in and then talk about that.
How long you put it in for?
I haven't set a timer for it. So yes, so this is what the here you go. What the loose granola looks like when it's cooked. So you want it to be starting to get golden brown on top, but not burned. So you basically want to cook it until the top just looks like it's getting close to done and hasn't actually burned. There's still quite a bit of moisture in this, which is why we have to flip it over and cook it some more on the other side. And this is what the granola bar version looks like. I tend to smooth it out a lot more for bars than I do for loose granola. Loose granola, I just kind of make sure it's roughly even and then just put it in. With the bars, I kind of try real hard. And I also, for the bars, tend to chop up or pound up the nuts and seeds more finely, right? So that the bar is more even. So this is what that looks like. And so now the next step, which is very close to the end, is going to be to flip it over. So let's go for the loose granola first. Actually, no, let's go for the bars first. What we do is we got to get it out of the pans. There we go. And again, for the loose granola, you just kind of want to chop it up a bit because you want it to be in reasonably small chunks. And you can chop it up more once it's cooked the other way, the other side. So, loose granola is really relatively easy because you don't have to do a lot of futzing with it. what you basically have to do is get it set so that the other side is up. And then you can put it back in the oven again and cook it until the other side has lost most of its moisture. Oops. Now, and then again, I can chop it up a little here. I'm not going to worry about that too much because I can chop it up more when it's finally done. So the bars take a little more doing, but I like them. What I like about the granola bars is I can take them to work with me. And instead of buying a stale, oversweetened product from a vending machine, I've got an actual healthy, nutritious product that I can eat in the middle of the afternoon and get that energy to keep going to the end of my workday. With the bars, you want to be real. Basically, you want to chop them up into whatever size bars you're going to want, right? Obviously, that's going to vary based on your own preferences. Here, let me do it over here so you can see better. So for me, yeah, I go for about a 3-inch by 1.5-inch bar, I guess. And I use this nice wooden spatula that I have with the little curved blade. But you can use whatever you've got. So the idea then is to, there we go, chop them up just like this. There we go. So again, this is the size of bars that I prefer, but you can do it whatever size works for you. So then we come out, and notice because I greased the pan, it comes out really easily. If you don't do that, they'll stick and it won't work nearly so well. So I flip them over. And I'm just going to keep going basically through the whole thing here. And so the basic idea then, so the second cooking, like I said, the basic idea is to drive off most of the rest of the water. You're never going to get it completely hard without scorching it. So don't expect that it will be completely hard. But if you cook it until it starts turning kind of golden brown on top, and I usually try to go until I just start smelling scorched butter. At that point, I know, okay, it's time for these to be done. And I take them out, and then I let them sit on the counter in the open for another few hours or sometimes overnight. And then they'll harden up while you're doing that. And notice how these stick together, right? These are pretty solid. I could tear them if I had to, right? But they're pretty solid. Whereas the loose granola is just comes apart like this, right? That's the difference between the flat seeds and not. So there we go. So again, you know, if you've got one batch of, I did both. I did this batch half and half, so I could demonstrate both for you. But typically, right, you'll have one whole batch, which will just fill. I just use a second cookie sheet like this because it's easier. You just flip them from the first cookie sheet to the second one, and we're good to go. All right. So these can go right back in the oven again. Now, normally you would not cook them the way this one is. I've got both the first half batch and the second half batch in the same oven, which normally wouldn't work because the second half has to be cooked at a lower temperature. There's more of the water is gone, which means it's going to scorch more easily. So for the second cooking, I turn it down to 300 degrees. and then I keep a closer eye on it. For the first half cooking, you have a little more flexibility. If you don't get to it right away and leave it in for a little longer, it's usually okay. For the second half, if you let it go too long, you'll get it scorched and carbonized, which you definitely don't want. I lost at least one batch that way by not getting to the oven quick enough. So you got down to 300 from 350, and then keep a good eye on it. Use your nose, right? Again, when you try to start smelling scorched, then it's time to be done. So I wanted to show you a little bit what the final product looks like. Here, you get a bowl. I don't actually have any bars that I can show you, unfortunately. But this is what the loose granola looks like, basically. I could have chopped it up. Yeah, there you go. I could have chopped it up more than I did. Again, this works great as a breakfast cereal. I just put some in a bowl, throw some fruit in it, put some cream or yogurt or milk over it, and it's a hearty, nourishing breakfast that requires almost no effort at all. And again, once I make a batch, this batch, the recipe makes basically about 2 quarts. So I fill it up in about 2-quart jars, and you can refrigerate it if you want, or just leave it on your counter if you want. Either way works fine. And then just eat it till it's gone and make more. So I guess we got some time for questions. Does anybody have questions? I'm looking at the screen here.
I don't see any.
I don't see any questions. Come on, let's have some questions. We got 8 minutes left.
So there's a number of questions that have come in. I believe Sheila's here also to field them. Sheila, are you with us right now?
Yeah, can you hear me or not?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay,
I can hear you.
super. All right. So one question was about different types of oats, quick oats, raw rolled oats, steel cut oats.
Yeah. Good question. So you want, I use rolled or oats. Steel cut should work fine. You don't want quick oats because those are specifically processed to make them cook quicker. I guess if that's all you had, it would probably work, but I think you would get a much more mushy product that doesn't have as well-defined grains out of that. If you're making bars, that's actually probably okay. But certainly, yes, I think going for rolled oats or maybe steel cut is probably best.
And I want to remind people that if you scroll up in the chat, you can see it's quite a long link, but it's a link where you can go to a PDF of Michael's full recipe. But some people were asking about the oven temperature, and it sounded as if you were using 2 different oven temperatures for the different stages.
Yes, so let me clarify that. Yes, and that is in the recipe. So I start at 350 for the first half. And that
For how long?
For at least an hour, and it may take longer than that. So basically, you need to experiment with your oven and depending on exactly what mixture of grains and seeds you use. You want to cook it until the top surface is pretty much getting close to done. So you want it a little bit golden brown, but definitely not burned. And at that point, that's when you want to take it out and then flip it over into either the same pan or a clean cookie sheet, and then cook it on the other side at 300. And then you want to, that usually takes another 45 minutes roughly, maybe an hour, but you want to keep a close eye on it and a close nose on it. If it starts smelling burnt, take it out right away. And then you want to let it sit out on the counter for several hours at least. I often just let it sit overnight till the next day, and that will let the rest of the moisture evaporate. And the final product is you want it hard as crunchy as you can get without it being burnt. Basically, the harder it is, the better, the longer it will last without spoiling.
So there's a question about whether you have a convection oven or not.
I do, and I do cook it on convection, yes, because the whole point is to let it wet cook at the beginning, but you want the moisture to go away as the cooking process proceeds. So yes, the convection oven helps to dry it out. So yes, if you have one, definitely use that.
Okay.
These are good questions.
And then there are several questions having to do with different kinds of seeds. So, for example, if you're adding seeds for flavor, such as fennel or chia seeds, pumpkin seeds, etc., could you go over again at what stage should those be added and how should they be treated?
Absolutely. So if it's a big seed like a pumpkin seed, you definitely want it to go in the fermentation step. So when I use the raw pumpkin seeds, I pound them and make sure the outer hull is cracked, which helps them cook through when the cooking time comes, and also helps the yeast and bacteria get inside to ferment them. Smaller seeds like chia seeds or flax seeds, you can put in during the fermentation process. That's perfectly fine, or you can add them at the end. It all, it's works either way. But the small seeds, definitely you want to grind them up in like I showed in a little herb grinder, because otherwise your digestive system just can't do much with them. Right. So yes, you can definitely use chia seeds or flax seeds or any other little kind. Just grind them up. And again, the flax make it hold together nicely to make bars. If you don't want it to do that, then you don't want flax seeds. I don't know if chia seeds will do that or not. You'll have to experiment.
So there are a number of questions related to pumpkin seeds because, of course, you could extract the pumpkin seeds from an actual pumpkin, or you could buy old pumpkin seeds. There are some questions about. Well, one says, are pumpkin seeds the inside of what we call pumpkin seeds? So I think that's referring to the hulled and the not hulled.
Oh, right. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's a good question. I'm just trying to think. I mean, the stuff that you just pull out of a pumpkin is clearly edible. I've roasted them and eaten them before. You don't need to actually take the outer layer off. So yes, you could certainly, I think, use them in this recipe. You just want to get all the slimy stuff off first. Although actually, if you don't mind the pumpkin taste, you can probably put that in too, and it'll just ferment like everything else. So yes, but the clearly thing is you got to crack that hard outer hull. Otherwise, it won't cook properly in the oven. That's the crucial thing.
But you also use the hulled pumpkin seeds?
Yes. Yeah, right. Like, so the hulled, you get these at the Willie Street Co-op. Yes.
And there's something called pepitas, I think?
Yeah. Yeah.
Same thing.
Same thing, yeah.
Is there any difference between seeds from different kinds of pumpkins, like small pie pumpkins versus big jack-o'-lanterns?
No idea.
Okay.
I'm pretty certain that pumpkin seeds of any kind of actual pumpkin are edible, but I don't know much about the difference. Like I said, I have actually roasted seeds from a real pumpkin, but I haven't actually used those in the granola. My granola, all the batches I've made have used that I've used pumpkin seeds have all gotten them from the co-op.
Then another question about the pumpkin seeds. If you were getting them out of a pumpkin, would you dehydrate them first? And does that have an effect on rancidity, loss in nutritional value?
But you don't need to if you take them out of pumpkin. If they're going right into a bowl full of water and fermenting anyway, I don't see that dehydrating would do much. like I said, you might want to take the kind of slimy, stringy stuff that they're encased in off of that, separate them from that. But other than that, I would just throw them in with the oats and other stuff and let them ferment a little bit and then cook them. Oh, sorry, pound them first and then throw them into ferment and cook them. Yeah.
So here's a question about no-bake energy bars.
Mm-hmm.
Would you advise the same process of soak and ferment for grains and nuts you want to use for a no-bake energy bar, or do you advise cooking them first?
I don't know. I've never done a no-bake energy bar. I mean, the point is you need to soak the grains and then rinse them, right, to get the nutrients off. And again, fermenting helps to make that even process go even further. After that, you somehow have to get the water out of it if you want a product that will keep, right? Because if you soak grains and you leave them wet, they'll mold within a day or two. That's what they do, right? It's so much available food that mold just can't resist it and can eat it very quickly. And so if you want to keep mold away, you've absolutely got to get the water out. The only way I know how to do that is to put it in an oven and bake it, right? But if you have another way you want to do that, if you want to dehydrate it some other way, sure, why not? Once you've soaked it for 2 or 3 days, it's going to be reasonably edible, even if you don't cook it, I guess. Though, frankly, I think cooking is certainly going to make it better than not cooking. So, I don't know. I like cooked food. I'm not a raw food kind of person. So,
you mentioned adding fruit to the finished granola when you prepare it for breakfast. Do you sometimes include dried fruits in earlier stages of the process, especially if you're making bars?
yes, you absolutely can do that. The time to add dry fruits is right before you put the sugar and fat on, right? So after you've soaked and rinsed the grains, is when you want to add the dried fruit. Because if you have dried fruit in while it's fermenting, that will make the fermenting process go too much, I think. Because, sugar, just having that much available sugar is going to, you'll probably get alcohol and other stuff that you don't necessarily want. But once the grains themselves are fermented and rinsed, then you can throw dried fruit in, mix, then coat it all with fat and sugar and stick it in the oven. And yes, you'll get a nice tasty bar or batch of loose granola with dried fruit.
So a question about nutrition from a nutritional perspective, is there any difference between hand grinding or using a food processor or a blender? This person says they blend their miso for miso soup and wonder if that affects the nutritional value of the miso.
I don't think so. No, it's just a matter of your preference. I could use a food processor. I don't know. I find a tactile joy in pounding the nuts and pulverizing them myself. That's why I do it that way. I don't think there's any reason not to use a food processor if you have one and enjoy using it.
Well, we have come to the end of our questions. Does anyone else have any question to ask? You can put it.
One more thing before I go, that this is the kind of information and education that we provide at Wildwood Institute. And if you want to learn more of this kind of stuff, I invite you to check out our website, wildwoodinstitute.com, and see what we have to offer.
Great. And my colleague Carrie, I think, will be putting that link into the chat, although I think it's also, yes, it's also near the very top of the chat as well, wildwoodinstitute.com.
And also the link to the recipe too.
So yes, one of our comments is, I'm motivated to try making some fermented granola soon, says Joyce. Yes.
Excellent.
Excellent. So thank you so much, Michael. And I'm just going to come up and say a few closing things. And we sure thank all of our presenters and all of our participants. So I'm going to
So I've enjoyed this very much, and happy cooking, everyone.
Great. Super. Well, thank you all for participating. This was a big experiment for us to try and figure out if we could have an herb fair this year, if we could pull it off. And it looks like we did, especially with help from our stalwart tech support person, Vince, who was a huge help today. And as each of these sessions finishes on Crowdcast, a video recording of the session becomes available within 1 minute. And so the main landing page for the herb fair will continue to be the place that you can go and find those videos to view. We anticipate having them up for the rest of November on Crowdcast at the same URL that's for the main herb fair. And I think most of you have figured out by now that if you want to see the different sessions, you go to this at the top left, this tiny little line that says schedule. Right now we're on session 8 of 8, make your own nourishing fermented granola. But if you click on the more button, don't do it right now while I'm talking, but afterwards, if you click on more, you'll be able to see all of the different sessions and be able to view any of the videos that you may have missed earlier in the day. We also expect to be able to extract these videos and post many of them on our Facebook, Herb Society Facebook page and YouTube channel. That might not be the case for every single video due to some intellectual property issues, but for most of them we will be able to do that, so look for that. And I hope you enjoyed the day, and it was really a fun experiment for us, and decorating my office behind the screen is a huge mess, but anyway, this has been a fun day, an interesting day, and boy, we had some interesting news in the middle of the day too, unrelated to herbs. So thank you all for coming, and I declare the 38th annual herb fair closed. Thanks. Bye-bye.